This is Genuine Connections, featuring collaborative conversations about community, content, creativity, commerce, and the convergence of media and marketing.
Welcome to the inaugural episode of Genuine Connections. And to kick things off, we couldn't have asked for a better first guest. We're joined by none other than Marc Scarpa, who is a trailblazing legend at the intersection of creativity, community, technology, media, and marketing, all in one. Marc's the founder and CEO of DeFiance Media, which is the premier TV and digital network for news and entertainment in this new economy, reaching over 150 million households worldwide. But his career goes back even further, spanning over 1,000 original TV and digital programs, billions of views, and just a resume of collaborations that includes Grammy-winning artists, Oscar-winning directors, Fortune 50 brands, even the White House doing President Bill Clinton's live town hall. Marc's impact in this space is just unparalleled. From pioneering now AI-driven content like Roxana, the world's first AI-powered digital twin news anchor, to groundbreaking projects like that town hall with President Clinton, and even the League of Legends World Championships, Marc has consistently redefined what's possible in the media and technology spaces. So in this conversation, I am excited to bring Marc in. We're going to dive into his journey, his vision for the future of content and community and innovation, and how all that continues to shape the way we create and connect and engage. So let's get started by welcoming Marc.
Good to be here.
I wanted to kick off with you because you've got a really fascinating background. Your career spans these transformative moments in media. I would love to hear from you how storytelling and audience engagement have evolved over your career, because we've seen different platforms, different technologies, consumer and fan behavior have changed.
Well, thanks, Matt, and it's great to be here. I appreciate your time and grateful to include me in your video series. I think that the sort of the core tenet of what I've always strived for as an executive producer director has been about story and live participatory media. And that was a foundational format that I discovered, if you will, back in art school in the early 80s and 90s, and 88 through 92 when I was at School of Visual Arts. And at the time, it wasn't really something that had caught on. Participatory media was really academic. There's been some documentaries where they would use participatory storytelling formats. And they were done in documentaries that were really about tribes and individuals and groups and so on. And I could get into a lot of references there, but anyone can look it up online and sort of see where the cornerstone of my foundation in terms of storytelling formats comes from. The other, I think the twist that we put in was, or that I put in, and the team that I have been very fortunate to work with for the last 20 some odd years, is the element of live. So you have participatory media as a format. Now you're adding the live element to it. And I think that, and we've been credited as much as being really at the forefront of creating that genre and defining it. Early on, when you look at live participatory media, you think of it in terms of webcasting and live streaming, and we were always, or I was always had the position, well, this is going back to even 1996. Anyone can take a piece of media and stream it live on the internet, and back in 1996, not anyone could do that, but we had the foresight to know that that's going to be ubiquitous at some point, that you'll be able to do it with your mobile phone. It'll be much easier to do it on a consumer basis and so on. And again, this is all pre-YouTube, Instagram and Facebook Live and so on and so forth. This is 96. So we looked at how can we make this an experience for not only the physical people that in those days were attending the event, the rock concert, the festival, the political event, the nonprofit fundraiser, or whatever it might be, or some other NGO experience, the physical people attending that, how can we bridge them with the folks that were online? And we did that very simply with just putting a live stream up with a chat room. And back then it was IRC chat or other chat programs with a real video player or a Windows media player next to it within a browser frame. And, these were very basic things. And we would take questions from the audience and incorporate them into the broadcast in some way, shape, or form, whether it be a musician on stage answering a question during a concert and giving a shout out to a virtual guest or so on. So,
well, as I say, you're finding commonality, right? Like that's one of the core themes around community, right? At Genuine, we focus on creating these authentic connections around these topics or passion points. How has the concept of community influenced the way you approach content creation?
Well, it's like I'm saying, all the things that you see now that are much more, that have a much better UX, UI, and are seamlessly integrated on all of your devices. We did in 1996 in a 3-day weekend. And then from that, used all of those formats and tool sets to continue that sense of community and participation. Like I was saying, when you have a real-time audience that's physically there, that's telling the online audience what's going on, and then on top of it, it's also moderated by, storytellers in the background who are real journalists, that's creating a sense of community through this chat. But I can only imagine what it is. But if I'm actually seeing it on top of it, now I've got what we now call Facebook Live, right? What we did then really defined the next 25 or 30 years of what live participatory media is. And,
it sounds like you're a pioneer in integrating innovative technology. Have you found a way in with artificial intelligence, bringing that into content and community? And if so, how do you ensure that these innovations enhance storytelling rather than diminish like the idea of humanity and the human connection?
We've been working with AI, generative AI, and a variety of AI tools with DeFiance Media for the last 4 years. We've been certainly at the forefront of using these tools for news and entertainment. We employ the first digital twin news anchor in history. Her name is Roxana. We have a digital news anchor correspondent, is the famous venture capitalist Tim Draper. He has a show called Draper, Draper Decentralized, and that airs not only on Defiance but on Draper TV and is syndicated out to a variety of other platforms worldwide. And what we have there is we're using AI not only in our scripting, not only the digital twin who's delivering it from a news anchor perspective. We're using AI to fact check. We're using generative AI to create, images and B-roll that don't exist. In a lot of cases, it doesn't exist because some of the subject matters are very complex, especially when you're talking about blockchain and technology, that to find existing stock footage for that or licensable B-roll is impossible. So you have to make graphics for it or use generative AI. It's just a faster tool set. And then we're also using AI and blockchain to put our content on chain using IPFS, decentralized streaming, to ensure that the content is available forever, if you will. And we're providing provenance as well with the assets that go into the actual video story. So yeah, we are, I think, we're 4 years ahead of most and probably 2 years ahead of the other most progressive company out there. The bigger media companies today are just starting to understand and implement AI for fact checking, which I think is a critical use case. We definitely do ethical storytelling and editorial. We still have an editorial director who checks everything, who decides what stories we run. We are using AI in news and journalism, specifically in broadcast news, in a way that that makes sense. We're using it for video packages and stories that are not investigative journalism pieces. These are more or less letting people know editorial that this is happening, or this is about to happen. We are not a proponent of using AI and any kind of technology tool sets to diminish the value set of journalists. Smart publishers will allocate, they'll use these tool sets to not, get rid of budget, but to reallocate budget efficiently where it should be going.
Part and parcel with AI and the innovation that comes with it and the opportunities that this unlocks. So you alluding to maybe more cost efficient or faster production or whatever it may be, or opening up opportunities to fund other things. One of the big trends over the last 10 to 15 years in creative and content and storytelling has been the role of data in this, right? And as someone whose content has generated probably billions of views just based on even my own research, how do you use audience data to craft these stories that connect on a deeper level? And if you're putting on your either like big brand hat or your small brand hat, how do they leverage these insights without the resources that giant media conglomerates might have access to?
Data analytics is essential in any type of programming that you're creating where a brand is involved. We do not do pay to play media at Defiance, so our editorial is clean. We're an independent media organization. Now, that said, we still are looking at our data analytics and going, okay, what kind of stories are getting the most attention? And what we find is that when we do broadcast editorial stories on subjects that are timely, that are in the zeitgeist of the general social conversation, that those stories get more response than others, especially if it's being put out by a major brand. For example, if NVIDIA is launching a new product, they're spending millions of dollars internally on not only labor, marketing dollars, and so on, in getting that story out through their publicists internally and externally. So all the publishers and broadcasters will have a different spin on that story, more or less, just like we do. We have an editorial directive. But at the end of the day, those are getting picked up and viewed more because it's already in the zeitgeist of conversation. Now, we don't necessarily, for better or worse, only do those type of stories. We're not a clickbait organization. What we're trying to do, and what we are doing successfully, is shedding a spotlight on the new economy and really focusing our programming strategy on sort of 10 specific areas of coverage. And if a company is ticking, say, 2 or 3 of those boxes in terms of the coverage that we're providing, our 10 tenants, if you will, then that's the story that we want to run. That could be a small company. It could be an influencer. It could be a company that's just launching, because we're interested in breaking those news stories. So we're using the AI in terms of stored research and data research so that our editorial director can craft that story in a way that's going to serve the community and our viewers.
It's fascinating and really smart. With platforms like Genuine, we aim to help and facilitate and turn creators into community builders. If I was going to put one line of our broader opportunity into one output,
into your peg and your press release to me, so we can do a story about
into my boilerplate, right?
Right.
But creators are increasingly, right, citizen journalists or even brand representatives I would love to hear how you think media networks and brands can better support creators in this evolving ecosystem to foster long-term loyalty and create. I mean, I think they create authentic engagement, but now it's about validation and amplification, right?
Yeah, I think there's a dangerous line there.
Hmm.
It's a two part answer. One is you look at a platform like yours and what it is from an enterprise, viewpoint. It allows a big creator or a big brand name like a Lady Gaga or a Taylor Swift to create their own ecosystem through their fan club, where they don't need to have TikTok, for example, being their gatekeeper and taking all their money and giving them 10% of the profits and the revenues, but now they can keep 100% still and have ultimately a better fan experience, right? Like if I can download the Taylor Swift app and be in touch with every single Taylor Swift fan and be able to have community based upon a common subject and an artist that I really love, and then maybe have a Taylor Swift phone, and she's got a token, and all these other things and merch and so on. I'm going to do that. I don't need to go to TikTok to get my Taylor Swift fix, right? I can just go to the app and be in her world. Now, that doesn't mean that these social media platforms will cease to have a use case. They're marketing platforms, but to put it bluntly, there's swamps. Any influencer that is talking about a brand, ultimately, if they're ethical, is disclosing that and is being paid to do so. So it's a disservice to the community when they think that information is actually news, because it's not. It's opinion news. It's influencer marketing, and that's great. But so many people get their news from, say, Twitter or from an influencer on Twitter, as opposed to, say, the Wall Street Journal on Twitter, which is an organization that's got a high standard of ethics. Whereas if it was just an influencer, the coverage would be very different. It wouldn't be coverage at all. It would just be, hey, isn't this great? Buy this product, and or this person is innocent. So I think what is happening is that the lines are blurred, and people are taking in influencer marketing from these platforms, thinking that it is credible information that has gone through at least the process of ethics, and it's not. And that's very dangerous. Whereas if I'm using your platform and I'm on the Taylor Swift app, I know everything there is just about a subject that I love. And so to me, that's a safer environment than getting information about her, say, through TikTok or Twitter or Instagram, because it's made up by somebody else and it could be completely false. I think what we need to see is more recognition of ethical blue chip news organizations getting their fair shake in terms of being sources for youth culture.
Well, this is even where formats matter, right? Because a company like the Wall Street Journal or any news outlet, which is used to creating content in print, now has to adapt to the ways in which consumers engage and consume content, right? So maybe creating video based content that still communicates what is news and what is happening in the world, but in a format that's much more contextually relevant, is the way that those types of
Yeah,
companies adapt.
a
I
hundred,
wonder if
a
it's
hundred percent, Matt.
yeah. I mean, I wonder if it's format versus context or both. But
It's both. So I've been saying since the 90s, you have to respect the platform that you're on. And yeah, you're right. Wall Street Journal is a publisher. They're not a broadcast media company. The traditional TV folks really look at digital, or have been for many years, as sort of a bastard stepchild. And smart ones like Bloomberg don't do that. Then you have the new breed ones like Cheddar, who just went really all in on being CNN for millennials. And it worked for a while. So you would have to take that same news story, and the way it goes out on TV is different than it's going to go out on YouTube, is different than it's going to go out on say, Twitter or Twitch or X and so on. You have to respect the platform, absolutely. But that doesn't mean that you can't take the same library of video content around that story and deliver it in a way that will communicate with that particular platform's audience and still have your brand on it, so that people know that the information I'm seeing is factually correct as best it can be and relevant.
From a creative perspective, and you can interpret the word creative how you want, which is part of the definition of creativity. But how do you how do you cultivate a culture of creativity and innovation beyond just you, like with your team, with your colleagues, with your partners?
Culture is very important. It's sort of content drives culture, drives commerce at the end of the day. And there's really a couple of more C's in there, like community, for example, too. So, but it starts with the content in many ways, and the content should be reflective of what's going on in culture anyway. So something becomes bigger because a bunch of people get behind it, right? Let's look at, I don't know, grunge music, right? So grunge music at the time was the furthest thing from anybody's mind. It was not what was popular. Boy bands were popular. All this music was popular.
80s pop,
and then out of nowhere, a record label and some smart independent record label people found a whole treasure trove of music and music culture that was coming out of the Pacific Northwest. It wasn't just Nirvana. It was like about 24 bands. And they said, well, there's a catalog here and a subculture that's happening. How do we take the subculture and turn it into popular culture? You have to have great musicians, great artists, and they have to represent the voice of that subculture. And at some point through media, whether it's news media, music videos, documentaries, movies, getting it out on every radio station, it becomes quite commercial at some point. And that's the definition of content, right? You identify something that's a growing trend and you maximize it. And then something that's a subculture, you can make content, then it becomes part of the cultural zeitgeist, and then you have the ability to have community around it, which then drives commerce. So it's critical to constantly always be looking at the next big thing. Social media with a platform called 6 Degrees, and then it became Friendster, and then MySpace and Facebook. So now it's 25 years plus later, and what we have is so many subcultures that can exist in their own world with a limited amount of people without it turning into pop culture and still be profitable doing it. And that's across the board. So it's all really decentralized. The information is so decentralized and so maxi distributed, it's almost kind of hard to find what you want.
Defiance is really focused on the new economy, which is something I've been excited about and a part of as long as it's been new over these last few years. But what does that mean for storytelling, right? Getting back to this idea of how platforms can contribute to shaping a more connected, community-driven, media-centric future.
Yeah, I think, there's a lot of different ways to approach that. I can only speak to our philosophies and how we're approaching it. We see the new economy as a term and a philosophy that was actually created on Wall Street in the early 80s, coming to fruition today. And we're very focused on our 10 tenets, if you will. The topics that we cover were, blockchain, digital currencies, digital assets, AI, cybersecurity, and green tech, and so on. We also philosophically see that there's a cultural phenomenon here. So social impact companies and regenerative culture are all a part of this. So we've taken a very narrow lens in terms of what we're focused on. We're not doing stories on geopolitics. We're not covering, stories on drug lords and religion. There's plenty of mass media that's doing that. If we do a story on that is about, say, something tied to politics, it's typically with regards to policy around the 10 topics that we cover, and or it might be something like, okay, for example, when the war broke out in Ukraine a few years ago, there was a movement of a lot of folks creating NFTs and donating the proceeds to humanitarian efforts.
I think I contributed to that. I still own those NFTs.
Right. So, but that was a good use of time, right? You had artists creating digital content, digital art, and then taking all, if not most of the proceeds and digitally transferring those assets to people who didn't have money in their bank accounts anymore, but they were able to get that money on their mobile phone, and it went towards things that they needed, right? Basic things like, the ability to buy a train ticket or gas to get out of the country, and food and shelter and so on. We again are a media company. We focus on video and broadcast, but I think you got to know where you're getting your news and information from, and you have to do your own due diligence before you buy any kind of financial instrument. But on top of that, you should also be clear on where you're getting your news and information from, and knowing that source is actually one that is credible.
So yeah, we call it DYOR for a reason. So last question, and this probably is more of a marketing angle than pure like media, but I guess if I was going to ask, like, what's the one piece of advice you'd give to a brand or a marketer as they're thinking about platforms and just starting to explore the power of community-driven, video-powered storytelling?
I think that's a very simple answer, is don't drive your brand strategy 100% based upon data. It's like making a movie only because the data says that if you make this movie, you'll make lots of money. That is the worst thing that a brand can do. It stifles innovation. It stifles them being a market maker as opposed to a market follower. Apple Computers is a perfect example. Chiat Day was their agency of record for years. Jason Chiat, who's now passed, was one of the great advertising geniuses, along with David Ogilvy and Donny Deutsch of all time, Richard Kirschenbaum. And, you look at those ads and they still hold up today. And it was all about provoking thought. And it was provoking this idea of individualism and community, but through our product, which was, whatever Apple Computer was. I really, really think that is important, especially for these new companies that are out there now that maybe don't even hire an agency. They just do everything in-house, and they have, a person that is a growth marketer, which is great. And I'm not saying that's a completely made up role. They're just looking at, well, what are your data analytics, and we'll buy media because you have these amount of eyeballs, and that's going to help us sell Y amount of product. That's great, but it's not going to elevate your brand, and it's going to be a quick road to death for your brand, because you're not telling the story of the brand. Defiance Media exists to tell the story of brands through our branded editorial strategy, and to tell the story of the mavericks, innovators, and entrepreneurs behind those brands and behind those products and services that are being introduced into the marketplace. Because keep in mind, you don't have a brand, you have a company, and that company has a product or a service. To become a brand, you need to tell a story. And you need to do it over a long period of time. And no amount of growth marketing is going to establish your brand. It's only going to get you more customers, maybe for a specific period of time. If you're just a company that you don't care about your brand and all you want is additional products, additional customers through your product, for your product or service, fine, do all the growth marketing you want, growth hacking you want. But if you want to go to the next level and become a brand, you need to have a brand story. You need to have innovators behind that. I think Coinbase is another great example. Here's the first exchange that came out. Brian Armstrong, terrific leader. Here's a guy that has fought for guardrails from day one and getting the proper licenses and following the proper approvals and so on and so on and so on to be a leader for crypto in an ethical standpoint. But nobody knew who he was. And it wasn't until they started doing documentaries on him. He started doing some other media appearances. And this is all leading up to Coinbase doing their IPO a few years ago. But since then, he's continued to do that. And the reason why he's doing it is not necessarily to keep the stock price up, but with a genuine effort to help the entire industry by saying, hey, this is what we've been doing. We're the gold standard. All of our competitors should be following the same process, and we need to all work together to really preserve this industry and accelerate it forward together. And that's leadership.
Well, I commend you and thank you for your leadership and your thoughtfulness and the generosity of your time here. So thank you again for doing this and for making a genuine connection with us and appreciate it.
Thanks for your time, Matt. Look forward to collaborating with you guys in the short term.